for you to, I'll give you all the empowerment to feed me the questions that you think I should answer next or answer first. You can either group them by themes or what you think is appropriate. So feel free to interrupt me even during the presentation.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we'll give you some time, and then I'll just let you know when there's 10 minutes left in the session, and hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A maybe at the end.
Sounds good. And hello, everyone. Welcome to session A. We're talking about really championing and sponsorship. I changed the title a little bit because I don't want to make it seem as if it's an identity. This allyship is really based in action. And as we're waiting for people to trickle in more, channeling Lara and her amazing keynote, share in the chat. What are your dreams? What's your dream right now? You know, if you're literally holding that glass of fireflies, jar of fireflies, share in the chat. What do you dream of 20, 30 years from now? Thank you, Seema. I'm a pastry chef. We can join one of those competitions, like Master Chef. Field operations in the Arctic, oil and gas. Sounds like a grand adventure. Thank you, Isabella. A professor, and for a lot of women to achieve their potentialities. Thank you for sharing that, Mandy. And welcome to everyone still joining. We're having people share in the chat. What's your dreams? Channeling Lara's amazing keynote. What else? What other dreams do you have? And there's a purpose for this as well. Maybe a hard question. Maybe it's the first time you've been asked that question. What are your dreams? It is a hard question. Yeah, thanks, Laura. The reason I asked that and why I start off with a hard question is we might have barriers in our way, regardless of the different parts of our identities. And if we're not clear on what that is holding us back from, then where does the motivation come from trying to tackle it? Trying to tackle those barriers. So being clear of what you're after, even if it feels or seems impossible, or feels like it's still quite a long ways away. Be influential. Thank you so much, Travel from Claire. Thank you, Rashmi. And read other people's dreams. Keep sharing it in the chat. I want to ground us in our definition in the very dictionary definition of allyship. It's having a supportive association with a person or group, especially when those members of that marginalized or mistreated group you don't belong to. And again, like I mentioned at the start, it's not an identity. It's an action-based element. I can be an ally in one moment and in the very next moment not be an ally anymore. Because it's about, am I recognizing that this moment is a moment where I can be an ally? And am I being responsive to that element, to that moment? Do I know and see what's happening right now, that there is bias influencing decisions or what's being said? And do I have the skills and awareness and self-confidence to be able to do something about it? And on top of that, do something about it in a way that is actually effective, that is actually helping the group or person that I'm trying to help. a little bit about me. I spent about 10 years in engineering consulting. I started off in water, wastewater infrastructure before really diving into infrastructure asset management, so seeing the system. I was also involved a lot in young professionals leadership development. So did a lot of volunteering with the Water Environment Federation, where we co-created these leadership development events, conferences, networking events, both within Canada and across the US, which led me to realize that my real passion was about empowering others to have the skills, to gain the skills, to communicate more effectively so that they could empower others as well. So helping leaders build more leaders. And I work with leaders at scale and also have my own business, working with executives and leaders in the tech STEM industry, essentially about being clear. How do you have clear boundaries? How do you have clear communication lines so that you create this accountability loop with people, the people that you lead? I've also been a salsa dancer for the last 2006, so 16 years now. Salsa dancing was my way of getting out of my introvert shell. I'm still an introvert. It's about where you get your energy from, which is solitude and deep connection with people. And at the same time, salsa dancing also gave me a little bit more confidence to try out having more connection with people. So I use salsa dancing as a metaphor for, if I'm in a conversation, it's not about saying the right things. It's about listening for the right things and responding in a way that is very present with people, as opposed to coming up with a question and coming up with the answer and not listening to the person across from me anymore. And that figures a lot into allyship, as we'll explain soon. A little bit about a few pictures. This is just more visual. I did a lot of work in construction. My first car was a Mini Cooper. If you've ever done any work in construction, that is the worst way to build credibility on site, is to drive in with a tiny car that isn't a truck. And so I had to learn how to build trust with people a little bit faster, because I realized that I started off with low trust and low credibility. But also construction taught me a lot about the metaphor of what's underneath, the unseen infrastructure underneath there. And I see it in terms of people as well, with the people that we work with yourselves, having that self-awareness and social awareness of what's driving their decision. What assumptions and biases do they have, do I have? Because we all have them. It's just a matter of how is that bias driving everything up on the surface. And the work that I do now is a lot of leadership workshops, training, and coaching. I love this work. It's hard, interesting work, holding space for people. At the end of it, it's about clarity. I keep re-emphasizing that. This is all about clarity. We are really great at talking to people and thinking that we are being clear, because we have this intention in our head and we all sound great in our own head. But when we put it out there, what is the actual impact? And I want us to really focus on the word impact, because that's what is effective. If no matter how good my intentions are, and I interrupt or I call in or call out when it comes to interrupting bias, is it actually helpful for that person? And the only way to tell is for that person to tell me and give me feedback. And I want you to think about your lens that you're seeing the world from. I grew up in the Philippines and the Middle East. I had a mom who was an engineer. My dad's an engineer as well. But when we moved to the Middle East, they met at work in the Philippines and married and had me and my brother. But when we moved to the Middle East, my mom couldn't work as an engineer. In a very patriarchal society where it wasn't necessarily seen, she wouldn't have been hired. She wasn't hired as an engineer. And so from my lens, I had this level of empathy already with how hard it is to not be able to do the work that you've been trained and talented for just because of who you are. So I want you to think about your intersectionalities here. I'm a male identifying person and I'm Asian. So there's different elements of me being an ally and where I need allies. as well. So think about where you need allies and where you can be an ally to others. Like I said, communication, single biggest problem is the illusion that it has taken place. I want you to keep that in mind, that focus on impact, not just intent. So share in the chat box. When allyship isn't there, what do you see? What's the impact? What's the result? I want us to kind of get a baseline of, why does allyship really matter? What would happen if it wasn't there? If it isn't there? Isolation from Jeanette. Yeah. Yeah, not being able to move up from Mirabon. No diversity, losing on ideas, poorly made assumptions. Miscommunication. Uncomfortable environments. Difficult to be honest. Not knowing what the path forward is. Just people that preach at each other. Echo chamber. Not much connection, minimal networking. Doubting yourself in CC. Whether you're even credible or your thoughts are valid. That's frustrating. Agree. Yeah. Allyship is a great way to, the word that I use is co-regulation. According to Ingrid here, is we go to dips and highs in our daily work, and having allies in general allows us to navigate some of those dips. Thank you, Jeanette. Yeah, welcome to workplace. What do you think gets in the way of allyship? For specifically male allyship, what do you perceive to be the barriers to why men might not show up or say something? Even if they care, even if they demonstrate that they care. Ridicule, shame, yeah. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing, not taking the time to properly connect. Toxic masculinity. Others' opinions, of course. Sexual tension from Andy. What if it creates this perception of me trying to help really means something else? Societal expectation. Yeah. Do not reach out, do not see its value. Yeah. Lack of comfort being an ally. There's a confidence issue there as well. And I want to point out a few things that fits into, and this is by no means exhaustive. There's definitely sometimes a lack of confidence. Is how do I know what I'm going to be trying is effective? What if I fail? And Anna just shared with her here is really a lack of empathy, is not realizing that's a thing. It's this is why intersectionality matters. If you have a woman in your life that has encountered harm because of just who she is, then it's already a cause for empathy. But remember that not everyone necessarily has that or believes that. Not saying it's a good thing, I'm just pointing it out. That lack of empathy, sometimes lack of exposure. Fear of repercussions, societal expectations aspect of it, lack of action. Like International Women's Day, you'll see a lot of company headlines and profile pictures on social media change, and it's equal signs, right? But it makes me wonder, where's the actual action? And some do, some demonstrate it. But again, allyship is about action, and overconfidence is, to me, about thinking you're just, this is the right thing. You're helping without checking in, which is low curiosity. Checking in with the actual impact. Did that help? It helped last time, but is it helping this time? And systemic factors. Having support from your leadership. Is the leadership role modeling this? And are the male leaders that are visible, are they role modeling good, effective allyship? Think back to a time when someone uplifted you. What did you see them do, see or hear them do? And maybe in brackets, what the impact was. How did you feel about that? Share in the chat. Laura, any confidence? Thank you, Laura. Yes, combination of interruption and championing and highlighting. Rashmi shared, recognize me, encourage me to do better. Mandy, encourage and teach. Isabella, walking you through and guiding you through this. You can imagine it builds you a bit more confidence as well and capable. And I'm asking you a lot of these questions over chat because it's, yes, I get to read it as a facilitator, but a lot of it is for you to reflect and for you to see what the impact can be on others. Exposure to other people of influence and providing me an opportunity from Seema. Thank you. Yeah, keep sharing that in the chat. Because we don't necessarily realize the extent of that impact as male allies when we try to help. It's important because we're seeing an increased awareness of this concept in the workplace. There's a lot of training on DEI in general, a lot more nowadays, which is a good thing. And awareness is not necessarily ability or competence, which is action. I want to emphasize that. Just knowing it and being aware of it and saying the right things doesn't necessarily mean it's effective. It goes down to impact. And one thing to note about allyship, whether it's male allyship or other forms of allyship, like Asian racism, for example, it's a journey. Everyone is on different points on the map. So I want to emphasize here just a balance of both empathy, of being empathetic to where they are on their journey, given they demonstrate they want to care, they care and they want to do better as an ally, and balancing it with accountability. So we don't want to be ruinously empathetic and say, oh, they're trying their best. Yes, and it's not yet good enough because it's still happening. It's moving slow. What is it going to take for us to get there? For you, Alvin, to be able to more consistently interrupt when someone takes credit for someone else's work in a meeting. It takes time. And I mentioned I'm an introvert and had a lot of social anxiety, which what salsa dancing helped me with. Maybe 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to speak up. I would have just looked at the person whose work was just over-credited and wondering, oh, that's not good. Now I would have confidence. But again, it's a journey. I want to emphasize that. What's at stake? Matthew talked about this. Start culture is probably the top driver why people stay or leave or grow and thrive or not thrive at work. There's a lot of it is at the end of the day, we just want to be able to do good work, to do our best work and to grow, to be able to provide our best ideas. And when people don't feel safe or respected, there's just less energy, less motivation to want to do this. And I'm speaking to the choir here. I know you know this, and a lot of what you shared in the chat just now, that's what it can provide when there's allyship, is energy to keep going. Visible male allyship behaviors. And again, I want to add a caveat to this in that this is all very contextual. It all depends on the impact. Sometimes good listening is willingness to learn, receiving and asking for feedback. So I started off my story, my allyship journey, really being invited to Society for Women Engineers events in Toronto. and just going to at least 10, 20 of those events over the years. Sometimes I'd go to a conference with 100 people and I'd be the only male. But it's that willingness to be there and just listen and learn, and also let go of what I think I know, so that it leaves me open to have a growth mindset, to allow my beliefs and biases to be changed, to be challenged. And one of the things about male allyship too is there's a lot of anxiety trying to get it right. A lot of, just even communications training and leadership training that I do in general, there's a lot of anxiety with, how do I make sure and influence this person? Or how do I make sure I have a positive impact? Or how do I make sure I don't create discomfort? What I would offer is let go of that anxiety. You will get it wrong. And you get an opportunity again to iterate, to move towards getting it right. If you choose to be curious and you let go of your ego for just a short bit, let go of that shame and look at it objectively, measuring effectiveness through impact, not just what you hoped you were going to create. So some of the potential actions that you might see, sponsoring and championing, and these can be interchangeable, but it's really about power. This is why we need allyship, is that there is a power imbalance. And at the end of the day, we can't always just take power. Power has to be shared. Power can be multiplied as well. Interrupting, calling in are both outward versus, hey, come here, I need to give you feedback. They're very different tactics, and it depends on the situation. Like one of the things I always recommend to men when they're trying to be better, more effective allies is build trust with the people you're trying to help, with the women that you're trying to be an ally for, so that they can tell you, they feel comfortable and safe enough to tell you what is really the impact on them. If you've ever asked for feedback from anyone, if you don't have that level of trust, they might not tell you the full truth. They might just feel like they don't want to hurt your feelings, and they'll tell you the positive things, but not necessarily the things that will help you grow. When we talk about allyship moments, trust is important because, first of all, I'm limited to my perspective and my experiences. So my ability to recognize an allyship moment depends on what I know and have seen in the past. If I think about it from a database perspective, if I have a limited amount of data in my database, then my ability to recognize a diverse set of moments is going to be limited to that database. So when I have trust with the women that I'm trying to be an ally for, and they come to me unsolicited and they say, hey, that just happened there, I don't know if you caught that. And then, no, I did not catch that at all. Like, what happened? What was the impact on you? Because only when you recognize that moment can you actually even do something about it, so that you can navigate the moment. Otherwise, I see a lot of men it blows past them because they don't recognize the moment. And so there's a support system here as well of giving feedback to the men who want to care but don't know what to do. It starts with realizing there was something to do there in the first place. And then we can talk about what is the right solution. Yeah, thank you, Seema. You really won't see everything. But when you have the trust of the people you're trying to help, they'll help you see better at the end of the day. And then you can start practicing the skills of allyship and growing allyship base. Again, my talk here is only for about 40 minutes. So we're not gonna be able to cover everything, but just give you a little bit of a taste of all the different considerations around allyship. And Jason later on today will be able to give you a much deeper perspective on how to actually build that allyship culture in an organization, because he's actually done it. So part of it is activating the allies, figuring out who cares, who wants to care, and maybe not necessarily have the skills yet or confidence yet to do something. And today, we're going to focus on emptying the bucket, listening. At the end of the day, that's on an atomic level, it comes down to our conversations that we have with each other. Because the conversations, whether it's fleeting, a quick 1-minute conversation, or a series of conversation that is consistent, builds trust. One conversation, as you know, can sometimes throw someone off and not feel safe anymore. Here's a question for you in the chat box. What makes you trust people? What makes you feel safe? Someone goes first, or someone shows vulnerability. Thank you, Seema. Alignment of words and actions, yeah. Give you a signal if they understand you, yeah. Give you feedback back. Here's what I'm hearing. Listening and sharing their own story and example of their response, yeah. I actually want to role model a part of this conversation. Now I want to throw it out to the group. If someone has a story to share of something challenging that they would have gone through, that could have been an allyship moment, feel free to raise your hand. And I know it's a moment of vulnerability, and I'm just asking for your permission. We may not get anyone, but I do want to throw it out there. And I want to demonstrate how you can just use pure listening skills and conversational skills to be able to uncover that with the women that you're trying to be allies for.
Hey, Alvin, this is Seema.
Hey, Seema. Are you able to get your camera on or no? You don't have to, I'm just asking.
Yep, definitely.
Amazing, okay.
So this actually happened to a friend of mine. It's not one of those, a friend of a friend. This actually did happen to a coworker, where she was in a meeting with our boss, and I think
let me slow you down there, Seema, before you continue with the story. Well, first I want to thank you for volunteering, and for everyone else in the room, watch as much as, watch for what I'll be asking, what I'll be doing. I'm not going to get it necessarily perfect, but just notice that, because that's the skill part of it. Sorry, Seema, go ahead.
So she was in a meeting with her boss and 4 other male colleagues, and she was about to go on maternity leave, and our boss asked her, "Oh, when you come back from your maternity leave, who's going to do the laundry in your home?" So she told me this after the fact, and I guess none of the other male colleagues said anything. They kind of just shrugged it off and went on with the rest of the meeting. I think there was a couple other follow-up questions that he had for her, but she didn't disclose those to me. And she also felt after the fact that she couldn't bring it up or call him out on it. And I told her after the fact, when I heard this, that I would be more than happy to sit in on a meeting with her and help her bring it up if she felt comfortable.
And how did you feel when you first heard this from your friend?
I was quite shocked. Yeah, ironically, I had just come back from my own maternity leave and had never had such an experience with my boss, as she expressed.
What would have been helpful in that moment, do you think?
For her, I think having an ally to say something, even if our boss meant it as a joke, it was not an appropriate time to say that. Sometimes he does have that personality where he would say stuff like that, but I think maybe in a one-on-one setting, it would have been more appropriate than in front of, 5 other colleagues.
Yeah. What did you find to be most supportive for that friend in the end?
I think just the validation of her hearing that I thought it was inappropriate, and her knowing that if she needed it, I would be in her corner.
That's she felt supported and then you had her back, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to cut it short there. Thank you, Seema, for volunteering and sharing. For everyone else, what did you hear Seema do? Share in the chat, or share it out loud, actually. I'm pretty open. Yeah. Simply focus on asking questions, reframing, rewording. It opened her up physically, emotionally. I did not make it about me. That's key. Ask her for her thoughts about potential ways forward. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, this was an interesting demo because since it didn't happen directly to Seema, I focused it more on what Seema's experience was, which is important as well, because if you were talking to someone that directly experienced this, then it's important to unpack what those reactions were and what values were stepped on. That's another question which I didn't ask, given that it was a secondhand story, but it's like, what values were stepped on for you if you had gone through this? So usually when something is offensive or uncomfortable, we can trace it back to a personal value of ours. And that's important because it helps us articulate moving forward when we give feedback to someone, which we're going to dive into next. So thank you everyone for sharing.
Sorry, Alvin, I just want to let you know that there's about 10 minutes left in this session. So
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mindy. There's what you said and how much people read into it. I just want to highlight that in terms of assumptions. So when I was asking questions, I could have just as easily taken some of Seema's words for granted. But it does pay to just slow down and inspect things like as if it's a piece of rock along your path. What do you mean by this? So a few notes about listening. Creating space is like a metaphor. It is a metaphor. It's about minimizing interruptions. So notice that I used a lot of silence as well. I'm very comfortable with silence now. And you have to also gauge for yourself how comfortable you are. If this was an actual workshop, this session that we're going through right now usually takes about 4 hours. I would have you face each other for a minute and take turns where one shares something about their favorite food and the other one's listening. And the listener doesn't get to react whatsoever. And you start to notice how often we feel like we want to interject or interrupt or share or relate. Oh, great question, Seema, around relatability. Relating, it's just a choice. It's not better or worse. It's more a choice of, is this space right now for this person that I'm trying to help, or is it about us, or is it about me? Right. So when we are helping someone unpack their negative experience, especially, is to powerfully use silence and give them and honor that space just for them. This is about you. This is about your experience. Tell me more. That's another thing that I say often. What else? Tell me more. Just powerful urges, nudges of, hey, this is your time. I want to hear more. I want to understand without me trying to relate or make sense of it. So it's powerful. What would have been helpful is, of course, very personal to the person that you're trying to help. This is important because sometimes I've had colleagues where me stepping up and interrupting was an allyship, effective allyship move. And sometimes it wasn't, because what the person actually needed was for them to be able to speak up, even if they didn't feel confident yet, speak up for themselves. And that's something I have to negotiate with the person I'm trying to help. Maybe what they needed from me was encouragement. It's like, hey, actually, Lisa wanted to say something. Just simply that, without saying it for her, as an example. Again, normalizing discomfort and asking the uncomfortable question, holding it loosely. I want to actually leave some time here for questions from the group.
Yeah, thank you, Alvin, for your perspective. In these types of events, we often hear of the struggles and determination specific to women, but your talk opened my eyes a lot to the struggles and determination we also need from the allies, who also need the confidence to help break down some of the barriers that exist specifically in the workplace, but also just in general. So I'll invite the participants either to raise your hand or just ask the question or put it in the chat box. And we have about 3 minutes left before we'll go back to the main room. So Shristi asks, how do you draw the line for uncomfortable questions?
Yeah, and I think this ties into normalizing discomfort question from Seema as well, is setting it up at the front before you ask the question. So I might say something like, I want to ask you this question, and this, if you don't feel comfortable answering it, that's completely fine. But my intention for asking this question is to understand this, and then ask the question. There's always an intention. So for example, if I wanted to ask you what was hard about that, because that can be uncomfortable, that can be re-traumatizing for the person. I might say something like, I want to ask you this question, and my intention for asking this is I just want to understand like how hard this might be for you. So what is hard about this for you? And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to go there. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Thank you, Steve. Other questions?
Alvin, I was just wondering, this is Seema again, if you could share a story specifically when you have to stand up for someone in your life.
Sure. Great question. So I used to be chair of the Young Professionals program for Water Environment Federation. And in my last month, my vice chair, who was coming up, we were at the same conference and we were leading sessions together. And we were invited to this bigger senior leaders meeting for the bigger organization. And the organization is like 25,000 people. And so we were at this meeting, and one of the men at her table, said something along the lines of, well, you must be like a diversity hire. Because she was Chinese, Mexican, and a female. And she didn't say anything in the moment. I wasn't at that table either. So she only shared it with me after the fact in the evening. And so what I did was ask her, well, what help is helpful for me right now? Like, I'm happy to listen, of course, and I'm happy to talk to that person, or, what is helpful. And the route that she took was she wanted to use it as a story for our young professionals group the next day. to share the harmful impact of having that bias. And the support that she needed from me as an ally was to help her organize those thoughts in her head, given that it was still triggering. That's a very specific example, but it came down to me asking, what is helpful for me as an ally? I'm here, got your back. But what do you need?
Thank you, Alvin. I think we have time for one more, possibly.
Yeah,
Laura
Steve one in the
asks,
chat.
yeah, Laura
go for
asks, what tactics do you use to recover if you're detecting that you're eroding trust instead of building trust?
I always lean into curiosity. So if I were to be more, not confrontational, but direct about it, I would say something like, hey, I was wondering if you had time for a chat. And my intention for having this chat is I want to make sure that we have I want to be a part of making this a trust-based, good working relationship. And my assumption is I feel like I've eroded trust with you, and I wanted to check in with you on that. I'm wondering if there was a situation that happened recently that might have done that, or am I just making this up in my head? So I'm checking in on the word you specifically used, Laura. Detecting it may be an assumption, and you may be probably correct if you're intuitive. But we want to make the other person be a part of the conversation. It's just like allyship. We might see a problem, we assume what the problem is, and we do something about it. But in this case, we want to check in with people so that we are more effective in the action and the words that we use. The other aspect of trust here goes back to values. The things that erode trust with people comes down to what values of theirs were stepped on. So that value aspect can be a great frame to explore and then learn from that person what builds or erodes trust with you. That's also in a conversation that I have my tech leaders talk about all the time with their teams. What builds or erodes trust? So you don't trip on it by accident. Is that helpful, Laura? Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, follow up. This is a very deep topic. I'm only ever a few steps, if only one step ahead. I'm very much learning myself. So if there's anything that I missed, I'm open and encourage your feedback. So thank you. And thank you, Megan, as well for supporting me on this, and Seema for your questions, and everyone in the chat for offering and making this part of a really collaborative effort.
Great, thanks so much. We can probably start funneling back to the main room whenever you're ready. Thank you very much, Alvin.
Thank you.